What would you do if you were a Roman soldier, staring down an enemy 5 times your size, armed to the teeth, battle-hardened, and ready to crush you? You wouldn't run. You wouldn't surrender. Because in your hands are tactics so insane, so unthinkable. They've outlived empires. Rome wasn't built on luck. It was carved from centuries of discipline, cold calculation, and a level of military genius that redefined what it meant to win. From brutal clashes with the Carthaginians to wild campaigns across frozen Britain, the Romans didn't just fight. They engineered warfare. They studied the enemy, twisted the rules, and turned fear into their weapon of choice. And some of their tactics? They went beyond logic, past the point of honor, into a place where war became theater. Fake retreats, invisible ambushes, armies disguised as refugees, even using animals to scout for enemy traps. Why did they go that far? Because for Rome, war wasn't just about fighting. It was about winning, at any cost. To understand how far they were willing to go, we need to go back to the early days, when Rome was still a modest republic fighting for survival, when enemies surrounded them and failure meant extinction. It was here that the Roman army evolved from a basic citizen militia into the most disciplined, strategic, and feared military force the world had ever seen. They organized themselves with mathematical precision, dividing their legions into flexible maniples led by experienced centurions. Every man knew his role, his formation, and when to hold or move. They didn't just train their bodies, they trained their minds, and as Rome expanded, their tactics evolved. They borrowed ideas from enemies, improved them, then used those very ideas to crush the ones who created them. But it wasn't just formations or weapons that gave them the edge. It was how they thought, how they tricked, how they turned the battlefield into a stage, and their enemies into unwitting actors in a deadly play. What kind of minds came up with these tactics? Who were the people behind the madness? To understand the madness of Rome's battle tactics, we need to understand the people behind them. The ones who didn't just fight in wars, they designed them. Take Julius Caesar. He wasn't just a general. He was a master manipulator, both on the battlefield and in the Senate. He once built an entire wooden bridge across the Rhine River, not because he needed to cross it, but to show Germanic tribes that Rome could go anywhere it wanted, at any time. Then there was Scipio Africanus, the man who flipped the Punic Wars on their head. When everyone thought Rome couldn't defeat Hannibal, Scipio didn't chase him. He sailed across the sea and attacked Carthage itself. He forced Hannibal to come home and fight on his own turf, where he finally lost. And what about Fabius Maximus? He didn't believe in big battles. Instead, he avoided direct conflict, cut off enemy supplies, and wore them down slowly. His enemies mocked him. They called him the delayer. But he didn't care, because in the end, his strategy saved Rome. These weren't just brave men. They were thinkers, psychologists, masters of illusion, deception, and control. But it wasn't just the leaders. The entire Roman military system was designed to adapt, evolve, and confuse. Unlike the rigid Greek phalanx, the Romans used maniples, smaller, more flexible units that could split, pivot, or combine depending on terrain. Their soldiers were trained not only to fight, but to react, to fake weakness, lure enemies in, and strike with precision. Inside every Roman camp, strategy was drilled daily. They practiced scenarios. They studied enemy cultures. They even learned how to act, literally perform fake retreats, panic, or surrender. Their camps weren't just places to rest. They were mobile war labs. And beyond the formations and drills, there were layers of symbolism that fueled morale. Trumpets blasting through the dust, flags waving high, golden eagles raised above each legion, a symbol of unity, strength, and Roman pride. Every soldier felt part of something greater. A war machine powered not by numbers, but by belief. Rome didn't kill its enemies with brute force alone. It broke their minds. But how did these wild tactics play out on the battlefield? What happened when Rome faced the impossible and still came out on top? Picture this. You're a Carthaginian general standing at Cannae. You've got nearly 50,000 elite soldiers. Rome has maybe 40,000. You outnumber them. You've got the terrain. You've got the momentum. And yet, by the end of the day, your entire army is gone, wiped out in a trap so perfect, it still haunts military minds today. The man behind that trap? Hannibal Barca. He arranged his weakest troops at the center and the strongest on the flanks. As the Romans pressed forward, his center slowly fell back, not in panic, but by design. They drew the Romans in deeper and deeper, until the flanks closed in from both sides. A perfect double envelopment. Rome's greatest defeat. But what did the Romans do? They didn't quit. They studied it. Then, years later, they used the exact same tactic to destroy Carthage. At the Battle of Ilipa, Scipio Africanus flipped the script. He reversed his army's layout. At first, his strongest soldiers stood in the center. Then, at the last moment, he switched. Powerful units rushed to the sides. When the enemy charged forward, expecting a traditional fight, they walked straight into the jaws of a Roman trap. The hunter became the hunted. But Rome didn't stop there. They began turning nature itself into a weapon. At the Battle of the Trebia River, Hannibal struck again. He forced the Romans to fight in freezing water, early in the morning, before breakfast. And while they fought, cold and sluggish, Hannibal unleashed a hidden cavalry unit from behind. A trap, concealed in tall grass since the night before. The Romans were crushed. They called it dirty. But later, they did it too. Only now it was on hills. And instead of hidden cavalry, they used archers from Africa. This wasn't just adaptation. This was war as theater. Caesar pushed it even further. In Gergovia, he faked a retreat, made the enemy think they had the upper hand, then struck from the sides, turning overconfidence into chaos. He wrote about it too, in his famous memoirs, not just to record history, but to scare future enemies. Because when a Roman retreats, you'd better ask, are they losing? Or are they luring me in? It didn't stop there. Romans once disguised soldiers as refugees, covered in dirt, wearing rags. They entered enemy cities pretending to flee war. Once inside, they revealed hidden weapons, overran guard posts, and opened the gates. Victory without a battle. They even used animals, like geese. After nearly losing Rome to a surprise attack, they noticed how animals sensed danger before humans did. So they started using them. Send a goat into a forest. If it panics, there's something out there. Rome fought with steel, but they won with stories, illusions, and fear. But not everyone admired it. Not everyone agreed. Because when war starts looking like a magic trick, some start wondering, are we still soldiers or just actors on a stage? Victory always leaves a mark. But in Rome's case, the mark wasn't just on the battlefield. It was burned into the soul of their society. The more they won with deception, the more the people celebrated. Commanders who tricked the enemy were hailed as geniuses. Their tactics became stories, told in forums, on the streets, in homes, like epic plays. The bolder the trick, the louder the applause. But not everyone clapped. Old Roman nobles, men raised on ideas of honor and valor, started to push back. To them, war was supposed to be noble, face to face, clean. They didn't like fake surrenders. They didn't like hiding soldiers in wagons or pretending to lose. They called it dishonorable, cowardly. Some even proposed laws to ban these kinds of tactics. They said Rome was losing its soul. But war didn't care about their opinions, and neither did the generals, because these tactics worked. Still, cracks were forming beneath the surface. The Roman people, those not in armor, began to feel the cost. Mothers sent their sons to war and never saw them again. Entire towns watched legions leave, never to return. And when risky traps failed, it wasn't just soldiers who paid. It was families. It was Rome. Some began to ask, is this really worth it? Are we winning, or just gambling with our lives? Writers like Sallust and Tacitus started to speak up. They didn't just describe battles. They questioned Rome's obsession with victory at any cost. They asked whether Rome was still a republic, or just a theater of war, ruled by men who loved power more than peace. Even inside the army, things changed. Soldiers weren't just fighters anymore. They had to act, fake fear, pretend to retreat, sometimes even fake death. Their training looked more like stage rehearsal than combat, and some began to resent it. Then came Cannae, a disaster. In 53 BCE, Marcus Crassus tried to outsmart the Parthians with another clever trick. He failed. Over 20,000 Roman soldiers were killed in the desert. Crassus himself was captured and executed. Rome learned a hard lesson. Smart tactics could win you glory, but they could also get you killed. And now, a deeper fear started to grow. What if these brilliant tactics could be turned inward? What if the same tricks used to beat the enemy were used to seize power within Rome itself? That fear became real when Julius Caesar crossed the Rubicon. He brought his army, not to fight foreign enemies, but to conquer Rome. War was no longer just about enemies at the gate. It was a tool, a weapon for ambition. Rome had created the perfect war machine, and now it was turning on itself. So what remained? What lasting value did these wild tactics leave behind? 2,000 years have passed. Rome is gone. Its legions disbanded. Its emperors long buried. But its tactics? They live on. Not just in textbooks, not just in museums, but in boardrooms, on battlefields, in politics, even in your daily life. Because what Rome left behind wasn't just power. It was a mindset. The first lesson? Adapt or die. Rome never had the biggest armies. They didn't have the strongest horses or the tallest walls. But they learned. Every defeat became a classroom. Every enemy, an instructor. At Cannae, they were crushed. Years later, they perfected the same tactic and turned it into their deadliest weapon. From failure, they built the foundation of victory. Second lesson? Use what you have, even if it's broken. Rome didn't wait for the perfect terrain or the best odds. They made roads through swamps, built siege towers overnight, turned local farmers into scouts, refugees into spies. Whatever they had, they used it. That's not just war, that's survival. And the third lesson? Discipline wins when passion fades. Roman soldiers didn't rely on emotion. They relied on structure, on routine, on training that made them act, even when afraid. In today's world, that's leadership. That's crisis management. That's how businesses and nations survive. But there's one more lesson, one that Rome paid dearly for. Power needs a leash. The same tactics that built the empire also destroyed it. Because once generals learned to outsmart foreign enemies, they realized they could outsmart their own people. The Republic fell. Ambition took over. The sword that once protected the people was now pointed at them. So what's the legacy? It's not the roads or aqueducts, not the coins or monuments. It's the warning. A message across time: brilliance without balance is dangerous. Yes, Rome taught us how to win, but it also showed us what happens when winning becomes everything. In war, in politics, in life, tactics matter, but character matters more. And yet, even with all we know, there's one last question left, one mystery that still lingers in the shadows. Was there something Rome never told us? We've walked through centuries of Roman strategy, from their earliest tricks to their final downfall. But what if we told you that might not be the whole story? Because behind every brilliant move, every clever ambush, every psychological masterstroke, there might be something more. Something Rome didn't want you to see. You see, history isn't written by the losers, and even in Rome it wasn't always written by the truth-tellers. Much of what we know comes from generals who wanted to be remembered, from emperors who wanted to be feared, from historians who were paid to make heroes. So what did they leave out? Some say there were tactics so brutal, so disturbing, they were erased from the records. Others believe Rome used early forms of mind control, drugs, rituals, even sound, to manipulate soldiers and enemies alike. Is any of it true? We may never know. But what we do know is this: the battlefield may have changed, but the game is still the same. Modern politics, corporate warfare, social engineering, the same Roman mindset lives on, not in armor or swords, but in code, in strategy decks, in media, in manipulation. And it's not all bad. Rome taught us brilliance. It taught us preparation, adaptation, and resilience. But it also left us a mirror, a reflection of what happens when winning becomes everything. So as we look around today, at the wars we fight, the decisions we make, the power we chase, we have to ask, are we using strategy to build or to dominate? Are we still learning from Rome or becoming it? That's the legacy. That's the warning. That's the story. But is that truly all of it? Or is there still a secret, buried in the ruins, lost in the silence, waiting to be uncovered? Maybe, just maybe, Rome's craziest tactic of all was the one it never told anyone.